allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. I hereby call to order the March 15, 2018 hearing of the City of Prescott's Board of Adjustment. This is an open public hearing. This hearing is being recorded and televised by the City of Prescott and, in some instances, by representatives of the public media. This public hearing may be rebroadcast on local cable television and/or radio stations. The number of board members present today are 5. It will require 3 votes for approval. During the hearing, an effort will be made to give all interested parties an opportunity to be heard. All parties wishing to be heard on the issue are required to raise their hand and be recognized by the chairman prior to speaking. Speakers will be expected to state their name and address for the record so that we may know who is speaking and be able to contact them at a later date if necessary. First item on the agenda this morning is the approval of the February 15 meeting minutes.
Approve the minutes of February 15th.
Second.
We have a first and a second. Any other discussion on the minutes? If not, call for the vote. All in favor, please raise your hand. Say aye. Aye. Carried. Second item on the agenda this morning is Variance 18-00002. And we're going to have Katie Peterson represent. But before we do that, let me recognize people in the audience. Jim Lamerson, our city council, and also our rep for this board. We have Matt Petracki from legal. And we have Darla Eastman, our recording secretary. Very competent, by the way. I always say that because you are.
That's very nice of you.
Okay, so Katie is our community planner, and she will give us the information on this. Katie.
Good morning. So today we have the variance application is, the request is for a reduction in the front yard setback to accommodate the construction of a single-family house. I brought some. This is the general location. So it's on Oregon. And as you can see, there's, looking at the aerial view of the site, there is a floodway that goes through almost the upper half of between the upper half and upper third of the lot. Right above that to the north, rock formations come down onto the property. So you can see here, the rock formations, large rock formations, and a grade difference. And this illustrates it a little bit more clearly in terms of the dimensions of the request. So the applicant's proposed building pad encroaches 10 feet into the front yard setback area on the south side of the house, facing the street. The front yard setback reduction would accommodate a building pad more reasonably. The proposed house is only about 1,000 square feet, so it's a modestly sized house that they're looking at, cottage style, in conformance with the surrounding neighborhood. Just to show you a photograph of the site, the view from the street. This photo is taken right at the wall at the property line here in the front. So you can see the lot's fairly small. Those boulders are behind the floodway. So the floodway actually runs between the rock formation and the front of the lot. So when you take that into consideration, there is pretty minimal space where you could put a house. And looking at the sort of the character of the neighborhood, they're fairly small, modest-sized houses across the street. This is the view across the street from the proposed variance. Adjacent corners, there's some houses that are larger with more variable setbacks. So catty corner from this lot, there is, this is the neighbor next door to the west. It's a little bit difficult to see in the photograph, but there's a house up here, so it's set back a little bit further. Across the street from this house, there's a similar sort of setback. But again, the ones right across the street are smaller houses and cottage style. So the character that they're proposing is similar to the character in the neighborhood. The majority of structures are in compliance with the established setbacks. And typically, a reduced setback would be of concern considering compatibility. But with this lot, it's at the edge of a group of lots to the northwest that feature those large boulder formations and the floodway. The houses have varying orientations to the street. So it's sort of a mix of setbacks and housing types. The proposed size would be consistent with the character of the houses on Oregon Avenue across the street and immediately adjacent to the east. Generally, I went through the variance criteria that are established in the code in compliance with state criteria. The report repeats a lot of the same information, but basically the northern portion of the lot prevents construction on nearly between a third and a half of the lot, as you can see in the drawing that the applicant submitted. And there would not be any, the proposed setback would still allow adequate space for emergency access. We didn't see any other detrimental effects that would result from issuing this variance. I don't think there are any other specifics to call out on this site. If you have questions, I can answer them, and the applicant is also here if you have questions for him.
Are there any other questions for Katie from the board?
I have a question.
Lynn?
Katie, I was just wondering the adjacency of the floodplain to the actual structure, the proposed structure. I assume that the site plan and the variance request were reviewed by flood control? Or flood
Yes.
district?
Yeah, so other staff have reviewed this project as well. So it's taking into consideration all of those concerns. So the construction would go up to the edge of the floodplain.
I think it's the city's intent, when you have a particular approved lot that has impediments or restrictions, either waterways or rocks, we give them accommodations for that, because otherwise it is a approved building lot. They just can't put their house exactly in the center to adhere to all of the restrictions, side yard variance. So it's important to understand the city's position on that.
Yeah, I would add also that this lot represents pretty much the epitome of why variance processes were originated, including all of the natural challenging features, the boulders. The whole neighborhood is really similar in character. So this is an appropriate request, in my opinion.
Is the applicant here and would like to address this issue?
Right here, sir.
Okay, please go up to the mic and state your name and address for the record, please. Thank you.
My name's John Matthews. I'm currently living in Phoenix, and this is my dream house here. So what I'm planning to do for the short term, this would be a summer home. And then once retirement things start rolling in, then we'll be considering a permanent move up here from Phoenix.
Well, we're going to welcome to Prescott from that nice warm area down there.
Yes, thank you.
Are there any other questions for the applicant from the board?
I could add one more thing that you really can't see on my little drawing here is what's left over is, as you can see, is 15 feet from the front of my proposed variance to the front line of the property. And then there's an additional 15 feet from the front line of the property to the edge of the street. So actually, the front of the house would be about 30 foot in from the street. Just another thing.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Is there anyone from the audience who would like to comment on this particular application for a variance? Hearing, oh yes, go ahead, sir. Please come up and state your name and for the record.
Hi, my name is Burris Nichols. Just name?
Address also. please.
Okay. 1412 Oregon Avenue. The adjacent homes flanking this lot are set back significantly further than the 25 feet. The one immediately to the west, 1412, is over 50 feet, and the one immediately to the east is well over 100 feet. Therefore, it seems to me this is wildly out of keeping with the character of the neighborhood. And I'm somewhat at a loss with the nomenclature of self-imposed, given that nothing has changed about the lot since he purchased it, either physically or with the zoning. I'm at a loss for how that does not constitute a self-imposed issue.
Well, he did not place the rocks there, unfortunately.
Well, they were there when he purchased it,
Well, they were there, but the fact is it's an approved lot,
and they're on the other side of the creek.
and then there's the water that goes through. So it's not, he's not asking for something that's out of his control, for instance. So he's saying, by the way, based upon the footprint of the lot, which is very key, I can only place my house looking at some variance. That's what he's saying.
Thank
And
you.
I think that we accommodate that based upon rock formations, dell formations, and all the other restrictions.
Thank you.
Does that answer your question? Oh, yeah, okay, somewhat. Sorry.
Thank you.
Katie?
Just to add partly in response to that concern, one of the criteria we do have to look at by state law and our code is whether they're offered any special privileges through the variance if they were granted that. So we do look at the adjacent lots to see if there's what it is that is particular to this lot that would qualify the applicant for a variance. So I think this aerial photo helps illustrate that. If you look at the angle of the floodway, so immediately to the west, their building is located just north of the floodway. That would have been the buildable portion of their lot in relation to the floodway. And to the east, these buildings are to the south of the floodway. The particular location of the boulder formations and the floodway on this lot make it a little challenging, probably for the applicant to figure out where they could place a house in relation to those two features. So
That's one of the reasons why we take a hard look at the topography on these approved lots. If the lot wasn't approved, that's another story, but this is an approved lot. So if I want to put a home on it, I'm not going to remove the boulders, I can tell you that right now. So, I mean, that's one of the reasons why we have, as Bryn said, the variances to allow an individual to place a home in a very restricted footprint on a particular piece of property.
right. So all these lots are zoned the same with the same setbacks, but the purpose of a variance legally is to offer some relief if there's something restrictive about the site that would prevent reasonable development of the land. So legally,
Absolutely.
in terms of land use, that's the purpose of a variance and
Yeah.
what we have to look at carefully to make sure that we're not offering any special privileges to a particular lot that other lots with the same zone wouldn't be able to have.
Okay, so, yes,
So my name is J. Diane Brederson. I'm married to Buzz, so we're in the lot 1412. And I understand the process of variance to the degree that I've heard it today, and I think it's important to take all things into consideration. I'm curious, if we're looking at the footprint of the home, and it's the square footage that is impeding on the required setback, why not consider a smaller footprint that wouldn't need a variance in the setback?
Well, what normally happens is we can't tell an individual the size of the home that they want to put on their property. The property dictates that, basically. So if the individual says, I would love to have a 3,000 square foot house on this property, it is impossible. What would be a reasonable footprint for this home, a livable one? And he's come up with his square footage, and it sets in there with all the restrictions. And I think it's going to be somewhat fair to him by saying, okay, you're not putting a 3,000 square foot house in, or with you having rocks in your living room. And I think he's probably done the best he could with the restrictions and the impediments on this lot. We look at that also, by the way. We look at
Okay.
all that. We look at why he didn't go for a smaller garage or a smaller living room or a smaller bedroom. We look at all that, but I think it's a reasonable square footage on this particular footprint.
Thank you.
That's my opinion, anyway. Yes, yes, sir.
My name is Mariner Carton, and I own the lot that the house to the left in the picture, to the west. And Buzz and J. Diane own the lots, and they've already spoken up here, to the east. We are the people that are most closely impacted by this. The triangular lot in the middle there is owned by the city of Prescott. And I take care of it. I have, when weed whackers are working on my property, well, I cut the weeds on that property. On the front of the lot, as has been mentioned, there's kind of an artificial setback, and that's because along that portion of Oregon Avenue, for about 3 lots in there, or maybe more, the city owns, instead of having an easement, owns that property that the creek runs on. The creek turns back and comes, and on my property, it comes back and into that thing that's very close to Oregon Avenue and runs in there. I'm not against somebody exercising their right to build a home and their dream and so on. And I've wondered for the 18 years that I've been a neighbor what they could do with this property. I would like to ask the applicant, because the plan is just a kind of geometrical plan. It doesn't show parking and so on. I'd like to ask about the height of the house. And I know there's a house across the street that, under prior regulations, built very high, and their house is above their carport to meet those flood regulations. But I think those have been changed, and so I see the living room, I see 2 bedrooms and a kitchen. Where will be the parking?
Well, excuse me for a second. Let him come to the podium to answer your question so we can be televised, please. Thank you very
Okay.
much.
Hello.
Nice to meet you. I propose the parking just to be on the 10-foot setback that I still have there, and it allows, well, about 43 feet deep and about 10 feet wide, so enough for the 2 cars
Okay.
that we have.
Okay, and it's a 1-story building.
Yes, that was a consideration. If I couldn't get the variance, and I don't want to do a tiny house, as you all know what tiny houses are, my second option would be to to do a two-story without the variance. And to me, that's more imposing on other people's views and just the character of the neighborhood, because there aren't any other than the one you just mentioned, semi-two-story.
Okay. Well, could you put the aerial back there, please? So now looking at your front line, and where would the structure be with relation to the front line of 1412? The back, I mean, you're getting a setback of
Yeah.
It seems to me that your front line is pretty close to the front line of where they're.
I would be a little more towards the street, for
A
sure.
little more towards the street.
Yes.
Okay.
And to tell you the truth, the floodways that I've gotten from the county, showing the new mapping from FEMA, actually the floodway is much broader than that, and it actually cuts right through their garage, half the garage in, half the garage out.
Okay, I can show you pictures on my iPhone of the floodwaters going through there.
Yeah.
And
So
yeah.
really that floodway up there, I would say, is more likely the creek itself. And
Well,
then the floodway stretches
the
out.
creek is just a trickle today.
Yeah.
But there are times when
Yeah.
that's the creek bed, yeah.
But the floodway itself actually extends further towards the street
Okay.
and makes it even,
All right,
might
that
add even
that
smaller.
clarifies my thinking.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Katie?
I just wanted to clarify also on the parking requirements. So for single-family houses, there is a parking requirement of 2 parking spaces, and they do have to be located behind the front yard setback. So that is something you'll need to take into consideration, whether you end up doing a 2-story to accommodate the parking or rearrange the house design so that you would have to incorporate that.
Okay, but the approval of this variance, then he's got to submit the particular,
Right,
for approval, the plans.
yes,
So that is where the specifics come in, once we give him the variance. And then he
Right.
might be restricted further based upon the parking requirements and the height restrictions, so.
correct. Yeah, this request is just a variance to the front yard setback.
That's only
regardless.
it's only for the front yard setback. It's not for the height of the building, which is going to be a little lower, or the parking restrictions. That's another issue altogether. We're just saying you can place your house within the footprint of this particular lot with all the impediments. Period. That's all we're asking.
And once you once the applicant submits building permit applications, that's when we would review the details of the site plan and the building height and those kinds of details. But there is a parking requirement. The building height maximum for this zone is 35 feet.
Yeah.
So any house in this neighborhood, even though the houses are, many of them single-story, 2-story houses allowed by the zoning in this zone, but there is a parking requirement of 2 parking spaces behind the front yard setback area.
My question is, 35-foot limit, where is that measured from? What's the base?
The natural grade,
The natural grade, okay. It could be, since it slopes downhill, it could be 35 feet in the back.
That's right.
And it could be 40 feet in the front.
at any given point from the natural grade at that point to the top of the house is how we measure it.
35 feet.
Right, so it's 35 feet maximum
Okay.
throughout the house.
So if you were on a
And
slope,
to the natural grade.
you decide to put your stem wall, it's 35 feet from that slope to the top. You might only have 12 feet, depending upon how your property is. So it's 35 feet. But now, if you're asking for another variance on that, you must come back to this particular board, because we're only giving you the first one if we approve this.
Right.
And then if you need to have a little extra foot or two to make it look somewhat livable, you must come back in front of us again.
Right. And Katie, could I ask you to repeat the parking?
It's, the requirement is 2 parking spaces. off-street behind the front yard setback area. So if you have a reduced front yard setback area that's approved through this variance, it would be behind that line. So it would have to be behind this point.
Just trying to do some quick math here. It's not working for me. So, 5 feet to there.
You might have a restriction on having one car in the garage, one car in the parking.
I didn't see any room for a garage, so I'm,
Oh, okay, well,
you know,
that's an
the
issue.
house takes it all up. The allowed setbacks on the sides are 7 foot. So,
So this might be the location for that.
yeah.
That's the kind of detail you'd get down to once you're ready to submit building permit plans.
Yeah. If this were to be approved today,
Mm-hmm.
then you start to have your architect or yourself start to decide, how do I need to have this taken care of so I can accommodate 2 cars, and then planning will work with you on that?
uh-huh.
You might have to come back to us again. I'm just letting you know that, because that's a very good possibility if you're having some problems trying to park 2 cars there in front of the setback.
Right.
You can't do that, so.
Right. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to make sure I'm not getting confused here. All of this that we're talking about has nothing to do with what we're considering today. Is that not correct?
Well, that's true. It's basically, what we're talking about is when he makes the application for the building permit,
But that has nothing to do
but
with
he's,
what
but he's
we're-
trying to get an idea on some of the items he's going to have in the future if he gets this approved.
Right.
Otherwise, an applicant can, if he has all those restrictions, can pull his application by saying, this is ridiculous, I can't do it, so he walks away. That's one of the reasons why we're addressing that today here, but it's got to be addressed with the planning group.
Yeah, I understand. And I really appreciate you letting me do that, because what can also happen, sir, is that I get something put together like I did this, and we go through this. I wait a month to come in, a couple of weeks for maybe approval, and then I do the next step, and then I get told, no, you have to do this and this before you do that. And, you know, I've been trying to get this built for about 3 years now because of the FEMA regulations changing. When I bought the property, they said they should be done in about a year. Well, a year plus 2 is where we're at right now. And I'm getting a little frustrated, but, you know,
Well,
that's just me.
Mr. Chairman, I only want to make sure that we're not dealing with how high the building is going to
Okay.
be, or how large it's going to be, or how many parking spaces there are. Is that not correct?
That's exactly correct. All we're doing is, as a matter of information for this applicant, on what he's going to have to go through if, in fact, we approve this, it gives him an opportunity to say, I don't think it's worth it for me to have this application for the variances. I'm going to pull it now and I'm walking away. He can say that today before the meeting. He can say that. But it gives him an understanding of the step process. This is only the first step. The second one might be more egregious than this one.
Yeah, and I appreciate, again, your time.
But you're not saying that now, that you want to withdraw this application, right?
As of right now, no, I'm not saying that.
No, but he does have the opportunity to do that. Okay, so is there any other questions for the applicant, or for Katie, or for anyone in the general audience from the board? Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve VAR 18-00002.
Okay, I have a motion on the floor. Is there a second? I have a second. Any further discussion on this particular motion? Hearing none, I call for the vote. All in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
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 All those opposed? It's carried. We have what they call a good of the order portion of this meeting. And Ray, would you please?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I move that we issue an extended for Tom Metzer's family, condolences, and As he was a former chair of planning and zoning and has been an active city person on a volunteer basis.
So I think what we're saying is that this Board of Adjustment is extending a conciliatory, sorry about the loss of your loved one. He was the Planning and Zoning Chair, and he just passed away recently. So we are extending that condolences to the family.
That's the word I was trying to find.
Okay. Hearing no other items, meeting's adjourned.